Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and one thing we're all really concerned about right now is water. Water there's, we're going to go into a lot of things. Water quality. The pressing concern, though, is flooding, watershed. So we've brought Hannah Inman on the show, CEO of the Great Outdoors Foundation. Hannah, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
We've known each other for a while, but we were just catching up before hitting record.
Yep.
Like last time, we were in like a blogging group in central Iowa. Both of us were doing totally different careers.
Yeah.
And I saw your name in a press release about a Google project.
Yep.
They're like contributing a bunch of money into water conservation. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But the first thing, I was at the mall, Jordan Creek.
Okay.
And my wife was looking for some workout shirts.
Okay.
And we were talking to someone at the checkout, and I was like, man, the mall is so busy today. And she's like, yeah, Jordan Creek is crazy. It's like crazy, crazy busy. And I was like, yeah, isn't it like one of because we've had the Jordan Creek GM in here.
Yeah.
I was like, isn't it like one of the only malls in the Midwest that's like actually growing? She's like, yeah, because no one can do outdoorsy stuff here. This is literally what she said. Delightful person.
Yeah.
But is that, and this isn't a trick question at all, is that historically kind of true? Like there wasn't really much to do outdoors here, or is it just a misnomer?
I think it's pretty much a misnomer. One of the things I would say in the last 20 years that Central Iowa has done really well is the paved trails system. And
like paved, like biking?
Right, like bike trails. And if you live near a bike trail, you know how often those get used. But my husband builds houses and does real estate. And we have this joke because a lot more people are moving to Des Moines from other places outside of the state. Mm-hmm. And our bet is how soon do they buy a bike within moving to Des Moines?
Really?
And usually it's less than a year.
Really?
So we have over 800 miles of paved trails in central Iowa that are all connected. One of the best products in the world. I love to cycle. I cycle all the time. So I think we're known, and then you add on Ragbri. I think the state of Iowa is known for biking. I think a lot of us grew up hunting, fishing, and participating outdoors in that way. I would say that those are the traditional ways. But what we're hoping to do is give people more access to recreate outside. So we do a lot of things, whether it's all access outdoor recreation like at Easter Lake North Shore, or it's activating our water trails with Icon water trails. Mm-hmm. People love to recreate, and again, the cities do their surveys, and it's the number one thing people ask for. So I think that maybe some people think that, but we're definitely seeing a trend to more outdoor recreation in central Iowa, and it's definitely something we're trying to put in the fabric of Iowa.
So I do want to talk about the Icon project here, but overall, what's the 10-second? It's basically you're more of an advocacy group, and you're raising funds, and you're essentially telling the community of Iowa, like, hey, we're going to organize. Here are the things that we need to be focused on from a natural resources perspective.
Yeah, so our mission is to advance conservation through innovation, collaboration, and stewardship. We see recreation as a catalyst for conservation, and that's why we got involved with Icon Water Trails. But we really assemble funds and vision to make big, high-impact projects happen.
Got it. Makes sense. So I want to back up a little bit because there's another misnomer.
Yeah.
We were in Hilton Head on vacation, South Carolina, beautiful area.
Right.
And our guide, now this is true here too, this is why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah.
But our guide brought up something interesting because I was like, I don't know if I made the comment or he made a comment, but there was some comment in an exchange about the murky water at Hilton Head. And we were in an inlet. It's ocean. It's obviously ocean. And he made some statement like, that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. Like it's green, and that means there's a lot of life in the water. And so I think a lot of people naturally think, in Iowa here, our lakes and rivers, they're murky and they're green. That's bad. That means pollution. That means they're toxic. But in reality, that maybe doesn't mean that. That just means it's a different ecology in different areas.
Well, Iowa is we're a silt-based water system, right? So usually when you see those like super clear waters like in Colorado or even some of the places in Minnesota, it's because they're either sand or rock-based. But ours are mud, right? So if you have rushing water, if you have a silt-based bottom, you're going to see that murkiness depending on the turbidity of the water. That's not to say, though, that we don't have our fair share of pollution. And when you look at water quality, everyone always asks me, is the water quality in Iowa good? Well, what does that mean? Is it good for what? Because water quality is actually defined by the usage. So there's habitat, right? How's the aquatic life doing in the water quality? There's recreation, and then there's different types of recreation. Is it passive? Are you kayaking, or are you putting your head underwater and being submerged? And then there's, of course, drinking water quality. And all of those are very nuanced ways to measure it, right?
Oh, sure. So,
for example, one of the biggest issues that we have in Iowa with water quality is phosphorus and nitrogen, right? It certainly naturally occurs in our waterways, but it's also runoff from agricultural fields. Yeah. And so recreating, for the most part, in nitrogen and phosphorus is not harmful. However, having the continuous drinking of those things and having the buildup of those things could be harmful or is harmful. So you have to evaluate water quality on the usage.
Sure. So it's not necessarily when you say, is our water quality good? Well, it depends on what your definition of good is. It's not exactly a lawyer thing. Right. It's more of hey, even if there's an area in Iowa that has zero pollution, it's I don't even know what term to use here, but zero pollution at all, no humans are even within 20 billion miles of this thing, it could still be considered bad depending on who you ask and depending on what we're using it for.
And also your own risk factor, right?
Sure.
Children to 5 have a very different one than children from 5 to 10. And then if you're immunocompromised, are you going through some cancer issues, things like that? There's always clearly a definition. Outdoor recreation in general is never a red light, green light, yellow light situation. It's a continuum. It's just like, is skydiving, is skiing, are those things safe, right? If you're going skiing...
Well, skydiving's not safe.
But if you're going skiing in Colorado,
true.
It's not absolutely safe.
True,
so,
true.
when you're talking about recreation, you have to take into account your skill level. You have to be knowledgeable of your surroundings, and you need to make the best decision for you and your family.
What should we be aiming for? Because I know that your foundation is aiming to improve water quality.
Correct.
So that would tell, of course, everybody that maybe it's not great in some capacity, right? There's something to be fixed.
There's definitely, yeah.
What are those things that need to be fixed? And as Iowans, should we not be drinking tap water? I reverse osmosis our water. I don't know if I'm crazy, but I just, something's a little off. I'm a little concerned maybe. I just reverse osmosis. Should everybody be doing that? Are we safe? Are we not safe? What's the deal?
Well, I think Des Moines Water Works, the utility, does a fantastic job keeping us and delivering a safe water to us. We have one of the most expensive water plants in the world.
Really?
We have one of the most expensive denitrification plants. And I think the crew at Des Moines Water Works does a great job. Here's the situation. We have Iowa is built upon agriculture, right? And there are things that can be done in agriculture that decreases the runoff of nitrogen and phosphorus. And then in addition to that, everything on the farm, there's a way to decrease the runoff. If you think about, we're blessed with some of the best soils, right? We put those inputs on. Certainly those soils we want to keep on the ground, right? We want to keep the soil on the farm.
Right.
So by putting in things like buffer strips, saturated saturated buffers, bioreactors, wetlands, we're able to keep the soil and those nutrients on the farm and keep that soil from running into our waterways. And that's ultimately the goal that we're trying to do, is how can we accelerate the pace for farmers to put these practices on their land? They're not cheap. They're not easy to do. And a lot of times it's complicated. The actual practice is not complicated, but it's to put together the funding to make that happen is complicated and a lot of red tape. So that's where we come in. We work with our partners to help accelerate the pace in which farmers can put those practices on their land.
Now, obviously, farmers don't want their because fertilizers, that kind of stuff, the stuff they're using, obviously they don't want it running off either, because then it's not being used in their land.
Correct.
But are we at a place where, and I'm not going to compare Europe and the United States.
Right.
I don't, just my personal opinion, I don't want to live in Europe. Like,
Right.
I've been there, it's great, but you know, it's an apples to oranges thing. Every time people compare, well, in France they do it this way. I'm like, yeah, but France also has these things. Do you want those things? No, I don't. Okay. But one of the things I've been interested in lately, you hear this all the time, is France, Europe, parts of Europe, they ban certain synthetic pesticides, synthetic fertilizers, that kind of thing. Should we be doing that here?
You know, that is something that I can't answer, right? I'm not a scientist. I don't have a biology degree. I can say that no farming can be done without nitrogen and phosphorus. We certainly need those things to keep our agricultural production at the top. I think that the biggest point is to have an understanding, and I think we're getting closer to this with precision agriculture, is we didn't have the technology, right? You think about farming, we didn't have the technology. You had to broadcast all these things onto the field. You couldn't have precision ag of where you addressed a problem or even knew how much nitrogen was in your corn, right? Where is that top limit? As we're starting to become more advanced in agriculture, we're going to be able to have those tools, and,
Sure.
and some of them already exist. But in the meantime, we know wetlands work, we know buffer strips work, we know saturated buffers work. Let's put those on and get that done.
The runoff issue, and I've heard this before too, but I kind of want to move on to flooding. A little bit, because we have a lot of flooding, especially our friends in northwestern Iowa, Sioux Rapids and Rock Valley specifically, hundreds of homes flooded, lots of damage up there. I know that the Great Outdoors Foundation's also focused on watershed, runoff. Generally, is flooding, like the amount of flooding we're seeing, is it kind of something we've done to ourselves over time by trying to control river systems? And is this kind of... I don't want, because we as humans constantly are learning. We do things, they're not great. We do the research, and we're like, whoa, we shouldn't have been doing that. And then we make fixes. Do we kind of do this to ourselves? And are you trying to reverse that?
I think what we're trying to do is to understand where flooding is existing, and are there parts of crops that shouldn't be in those areas, right? So you think of a river. Well, let's take what we've done in 4 Mile Creek. Okay, so 4 Mile Creek.
Great example.
Yeah.
Great example. Yeah.
Terrible flood.
Right.
What was the last one? I think it had some bad flooding in 2008, maybe again in 2018.
I know. My brother lost his whole office.
Right.
Because it was close to 4 Mile. It was completely flooded out. Had to redo the whole thing. Yeah.
Right. And so as those flood events happen, Polk County went in and did emergency buyouts, right? 4 Mile Creek is a flashy creek. That's what it's there for, right? When there's really large rain events, it collects the excess water, shepherds it downstream. The more we straighten, you think of how water runs, it's going to run where it wants to go.
Right.
Back in the day when we were settling this land, we kind of straightened some of those streams. We tried to, we engineered the water.
Right.
Well, water's still going to go where it wants to go.
Right.
And so, especially
Yes, it does.
in flash events, right? The Grand Canyon will prove that the water will go where water wants to go.
Yeah.
And so Polk County went in and did some of those buyouts. They have now returned that area to floodplain to allow that creek to flash when it needs to
Right.
flash. marsh. Put in oxbows so water has the place where it's naturally going and it overflows. There's some places for it to go instead of flooding out someone's house. Reconnected the creek to the floodplain so the water has some place to go. And then we're able to, layer in recreational opportunities on there. We have one more project in 4 Mile Creek that we're going to do at the top of it, and it's a wetland. And once that wetland's done, we have treated every agricultural acre that drains into 4 Mile Creek. We have now treated with a saturated buffer or a wetland. And the water quality in 4 Mile Creek, after having that joint partnership with Polk County Conservation, the cities, has been tremendous. It's changed dramatically. We need to do those all over, right? Because when you have a wetland, you're slowing, and an oxbow, you're starting to slow down the pace of water. So right now you have a lot of water, and how do you increase the value of your farmland? You do some tiling. If that tiling's just dumping right in a creek, that water that would have gone through the land and naturally filtrated and left some around is now just being funneled into a pipe that's being funneled into a creek that's now funneled into a river, and it causes extreme flooding. And so it is not a really easy solution to fix that, but you got to let water be water. You got to give it places to go. You got to let it have places to be stored. And where you can, you treat it and allow it to, go through a wetland to be cleaned.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're working with farmers to make that happen.
I don't like the blame game. That's, I think, where things get a little polarizing and angry. Like people are like, oh, tiling and all the dumb farmers and their runoff. I'm like, guys, come on. We learn. We live and we learn. It's like farmers are some of the best agricultural advocates we've ever had. Yeah. And I think a lot of, sometimes you talk the coastal, I'll just call them the coastal people who don't understand the Midwest are like, oh, you farmers and the farting cows, and they get upset about, I'm like, guys, farmers are some of the, like, they've been doing this, this pro-climate, taking care of the planet thing way before you were even in diapers. So leave them alone. But there is an aspect to, I don't like the blame game, but, we learn. And I wish there was more freedom to learn, and there, like tiling and stuff. Like there was an age when we thought that was okay. There was an age when we thought controlling the rivers, controlling the wetlands was fine. There was no harm to the environment. Now we're learning, and now we're doing something about it.
Well, and when I said that about tiling, that doesn't mean all tiling is bad, right? There's just some things that you can do, and certainly tiling is needed. I think farmers are in an really interesting spot. And this is why we focus on helping the farmer achieve their goals for conservation. So if you think about a farmer, even think about the last 10 years being a farmer, I mean, the ups and downs just in the commodity prices, right? The price on inputs, right? It's such an up and down time, and you can't consistently plan as a farmer because of those commodity prices, because of those inputs, but they're running a business just like you and I are, right? But with a lot more inconsistencies. I'm talking about the business things they can't control. Then you add in weather, you add in all of these other things. So when you think about the decision that each farmer has to make for their land, there are numerous decisions. So when you couple that with, okay, how does conservation work? And I'm just going to describe how the old school method of conservation, most conservation in the United States, modern day conservation, started out of the Dust Bowl, right, out of the Great Depression. So these policies were really written in the late 30s, 40s, and 50s. Think about how much conservation has changed since 30s, 40s. Think about how much farming. I do this talk a lot across the country with other people. And the first thing I do is I show a John Deere tractor from 1938, I believe. I think that's the year the NRCS was started. That's the main farm aid group for conservation. And it's a department of the USDA. And I show that. And then I show the most recent John Deere tractor that just came out. So when you look at the dichotomy between those two tractors, we're doing conservation in 2024 built on policies and programs that were designed in the 30s. It's nearly impossible to do it. So I'm a farmer. I had a great year. I want to do an improvement on my land. I've been having this wet spot. I know that it's probably not the best place. I don't get a lot of production out of it. I'm wasting a lot of inputs. be a great wetland, right? A great treatment wetland. I go to my local NRCS office. I want to do it. And now this is a couple years ago because we've gotten them to change a few things. I have to go get the funding, right? I'm going to bring in some funding, but then the NRCS is going to bring in some funding to do just the design work and to see what's feasible. That might take 2 to 3 years.
Oh, gosh.
And it's cost share at best, right? So then I get it designed. So then to actually implement it, it may take another 2 to 3 years. So I am 6 years, 4 to 6 years away from the time that I had that extra money that I wanted to improve my land. Think of all the things that could have happened.
What are they getting approval for exactly?
Well, you have to do
this isn't a leading question. I actually don't know. So if someone finds an area that would be good for wetlands on their property.
Wetlands are not cheap. They're expensive, right?
Oh, why are they expensive? To maintain them, you mean?
No, to put them in because it's dirt work.
Oh, put them in. Got it.
It's expensive and it takes a lot of engineering work. And remember, we're in rural Iowa where you may be far away from a technician, from someone that can do it, plus to go through the government process to get those reimbursements. And NRCS is a great partner. They are trying to, streamline it, but it's individual farmer and individual farmer and individual farmer doing this with each NRCS or whomever their cost share partner is. So what the Great Outdoors Foundation has done is we've met with our partners. This could be the local co-ops. This could be other ag retailers. This could be the NRCS or IDALS, Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. And Polk County is a great partner too. And we said, how can we streamline this? And how can we remove the barrier for the farmer to do this? Because I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to plant. I'm trying to, I'm actually running my business. How do I have time to put so much time and energy to get this wetland in here? And so John Swanson with Polk County sort of piloted with IDALS this great pilot project called Batch and Build. And so John worked with IDALS and said, okay, if I can go in 4 Mile Creek, if I can go to all these landowners, I'll go do it. I'll go talk to each one of them. I will sign the contract with them. I will bring one technician. He will go in that area and put in all the practices for those farmers in a couple weeks. And then I will come back to you and I will deliver you 10 wetlands or 10 saturated buffers or whatever. And then you will reimburse us for those costs. So the farmer has one decision to make, and now John can get done what would have taken, 4 to 5 years. He can get it done in 1 to 2 years. And the farmer just has to make the decision, and then John does all the work. Those are the types of things that we're doing to accelerate the pace and make it easier for the farmer to do the conservation.
When you talk of wetlands, these are something that were here before. And so when you talk about, it's funny because you talk about engineering wetlands, it's essentially like God made it that way. It was already working pretty well. Then we changed it. So when you talk about engineering the wetlands, essentially what we're doing is we're trying to put it back to the way it was, 50, 100 years ago, something like that?
Yeah,
That's basically what we're doing?
Yeah, essentially, it might be slightly engineered, but yeah. Essentially, we're just trying to put those low water spots, water is already collecting. Let's do that. It cleans the water before it goes.
I wanted to ask you about that.
It slows the water down so we don't have this tremendous amount of rush of water. And it provides great habitat, right? So then all of a sudden you have a nice, sort of shallow lake on your property that you can go, hunting on. So it has multi-benefits, and most people love having them on their property anyways because they get to hunt and it's beautiful and you have all the pollinators and all of those things too.
Yeah, and on one hand, we're getting rid of, just historically speaking, on one hand, we're getting rid of some waterways, and then we're creating housing areas and then putting little ponds back in because people like their water.
Well, and it's also
funny.
And it's also a storm water management tool.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I live in Waukee, and Waukee's been very aggressive aggressive on their stormwater management. So all those ponds through Kettlestone and through Triumph Park and things, they're beautiful. They certainly increase the value of the homeowners and the businesses around it. It provides an amenity, but that's also how they're trying to control the flooding in their area, really down in Clive. It slows the water so we're not flooding out the bottom of Clive in the watershed. And so those have, when you think about water, we're having to have multiple cities and counties work together because Waukee doesn't have a ton of water sources, but the water that they do have coming through Walnut Creek, ultimately, if we can't slow it down, is flooding out Clive. So Clive and Dallas County, Polk County, they all need to work together to not only improve the water quality, but to help prevent flooding in some of those neighborhoods.
Yeah, I spoke with a PhD guy, the name escapes me at this point, many years ago, about river systems and waterways. And he's like, if you could look at them, they breathe.
Yeah.
They breathe in, they breathe out, expands, contracts. And he's like, when you try to build super close to them and control them, like you said 100 years ago or whatever, we were trying to straighten them all. And water's still going to go the way it wants to go. It's still going to breathe and contract. You can't control it. That's what's going to happen. So it's really interesting that you're trying to, get things the way back to the way basically respect the waterways.
Yes.
It sounds so silly, but it's like it's already expanding, contracting. We're essentially just planning for that.
Right.
So there's this one, and that's not a ton of money, but it's $1.3 million from Google that is going to you for
so we're
not to you personally, obviously.
Yeah, no, it's going to the Great Outdoors Foundation.
What's that being used for?
Yeah, we're working with IDOLS. They have 47 grade stabilization projects that they want to do in Southwest Iowa. And so grade stabilization, what does that mean? It's creating some of these ponds, some of these wetlands, stabilizing in some of these areas where that water's just rushing into the Missouri. And so it does two things. It keeps the soil on the ground. It keeps the nutrients on the fields. It's also providing, water sources for cattle and things like that during drought times. But it's also helping to prevent or minimize flooding because it gives water a place to go, but it's keeping that soil on the ground. So we're doing grade stabilization, stream bank stabilizations. Those projects are the hardest to get funded. So what the Great Outdoors Foundation started doing when we had all those meetings with our partners of how can we accelerate funding is a lot of these grant sources for these projects are federal and state, right? And the federal and state ones oftentimes, and more so the federal, require local skin in the game. Well, that's great, but the majority of funding right now at the federal level has been focused in these things called Regional Conservation Partnership Programs, RCPPs. And they're fantastic because it's a great way to get a lot of projects done at once, but they require local match. So when you're working up in rural Iowa and you're doing a project that's maybe 25 to 50 million, coming up with local match to be competitive is really, really difficult. So what we've started to do is work with those local rural counties and farmers and start to stack money. So we could get this much in federal, we can work with the state and get this much. We might have a gap that the local governments need to come up with. They don't have the revenue to fill that. So we have corporate investors from all over the world that are investing in water quality, that have water quality or water replenishment goals. So we'll go in and fill those gaps. So our role is to bring that portfolio of projects together, bring those partners together, and then find the financial stack to make those projects happen.
Briefly before we end with Icon Water Trails, why does a tech company care? I don't is there something where the state of Iowa or where you are like kind of strong arming Google a little bit saying, hey, if you want to come in, if you want to play, you're going to have to contribute to the Iowa waterways. You're going to have to contribute to your community if you want to build this project. Is there some of that going on?
Yeah, I mean, Hannah Inman's really good at strong arming an international corporation.
That's what I heard.
No, I mean, listen, all of these large corporations really do have good, they want to be good corporate partners. And so they have environmental goals. We know data centers use water.
They use a lot of water for cooling, yeah.
Right. And so what Google, understanding that, recognizing, but also recognizing that they want to be a good corporate citizen, is they're putting money into what they call water replenishment. So how can we capture more water, like at their plants? They can recycle and use gray water so they're not consistently needing, they do things like that. They LEED certify their buildings. They do all of this other things. But then what else can they do in the community around them to help hit that water replenishment goal?
Got it.
And so that's where the partnership with Google came in, is they were looking for some great projects. We have a great partnership with them, and we have a great partnership with the state of Iowa. And we were able to put together this portfolio of projects that would have a local impact, but more than just the local impact in Southwest Iowa. It has an impact on the Missouri River, which ultimately has the impact on the Mississippi River, which ultimately has the impact on the Gulf of Mexico.
So they're coming with this, is what it sounds like. They're coming to you, or not to you, but they're coming to the state saying, we want to do this, and we want to contribute to projects that help better the state, is kind of what I'm hearing.
Yep.
Really quick, last 30 seconds. Can you just talk to me about, $97.2 million secured for Icon water trails. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
What is that exactly?
Yeah. So Icon Water Trails is, I think, probably one of the most exciting projects for many different reasons in Iowa. But the brief summary of it is, it's the community came together to figure out how can we activate our waterways. And this was in 2017. And the Des Moines Area Metropolitan Planning Organization led an engineering study. And it identified over 80 sites, over 150 miles of water trails in 17 different jurisdictions in central Iowa. And everything from creek walking up in North Ankeny, all the way to ADA accessible fishing, all the way to whitewater rafting. And it centers around downtown Des Moines because we have the confluence of two rivers, but we also have 3 low-head dams. And those dams have killed 19 people since their inception. We're having countless rescues. And they're not necessarily needed per se, but we need to mitigate the harm there. And so instead of, just mitigating them and making them kind of ugly, we're putting this water recreation onto it. So to date, we've raised $97 million. We've started the mitigation where you're going to have whitewater surfing and rafting at Scott Avenue. That is under construction right now.
Wait, that's under construction. Okay, I missed that. I missed that entirely. It's even though we're doing news things here, I can't keep up on everything.
Yeah.
So this is moving forward. The water rapids and whatever, all these little projects we've been talking about for years near the downtown area. This is moving forward.
Right now we have 14 active sites across central Iowa, and then the Raccoon River, which will include the Fleur Drive site, and Scott Avenue, which will include whitewater rafting and surfing, will be open by spring of 2027.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right, spring of 2027. So I'm hearing these dams are essentially going to be gone here soon?
They're not going to be gone because we're using them
redeveloped,
but they're going to be redeveloped and safed. So as long as you're wearing a flotation device,
you could go over one?
You could go over one. Yeah.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah. We'll make sure to get you out there.
Yeah, I want to get out there and go. Can I go over in a barrel?
I'm sure you could.
Niagara style? Maybe a little.
Let me check that out with our risk management people.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. Hannah Inman, the Great Outdoors Foundation, CEO of the Great Outdoors Foundation. Thank you so much for coming on the Iowa podcast. Real quickly, what's the website so people can look you up?
Yeah, www.greatoutdoorsfoundation.org.
Hannah, thank you so much for coming on the Iowa podcast. And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa podcast.